Good morning. Thank you for joining me today. This morning will be in Numbers chapter 33, verse 40, through chapter 35, verse 34. The king of Arad, the Canaanite king who lived in the south of the land of Canaan, heard about the approach of the Israelites. They traveled from Mount Hor and camped in Zalmanah. They traveled from Zalmanah and camped in Punon. They traveled from Punon and camped in Oboth. They traveled from Oboth and camped in Abiram, on the border of Moab. They traveled from Lim and camped in Deepen Gad. They traveled from Deepen Gad and camped in Almon Diblathaim. They traveled from Almon Diblathaim and camped in the mountains of Abiram before Nebo. They traveled from the mountains of Abiram and camped in the plains of Moab by the Jordan River across from Jericho. They camped by the Jordan from Beth Jeshimoth as far as Abel Shittim in the plains of Moab. The Lord spoke to Moses in the plains of Moab by the Jordan across from Jericho. He said, "Speak to the Israelites and tell them, when you've crossed the Jordan into the land of Canaan, you must drive out all the inhabitants of the land before you. Destroy all their carved images, all their molten images, and demolish their high places. You must dispossess the inhabitants of the land and live in it, for I have given you the land to possess it. You must divide the land by lot, for an inheritance among your families. To a larger group you must give a larger inheritance, and to a smaller group you must give a smaller inheritance. Everyone's inheritance must be in the place where his lot falls. You must inherit according to your ancestral tribes. But if you do not drive out the inhabitants of the land before you, then those whom you allow to remain will be irritants in your eyes and thorns in your side, and will cause you trouble in the land where you will be living. And what I intend to do to them, I will do to you." Then the Lord spoke to Moses, "Give these instructions to the Israelites and tell them, when you enter Canaan, the land that has been assigned to you as an inheritance, the land of Canaan with its borders, your southern border will extend from the wilderness of Zin along the Edomite border, and your southern border will run eastward to the extremity of the Salt Sea. And then the border will turn from the south to the Scorpion Ascent, continue to Zin, and then its direction will be from the south to Kadesh Barnea. Then it will go to Hazar Adar and pass over to Asmon. There the border will turn from Asmon to the brook of Egypt, and then its direction is to the sea. And for a western border you will have the Great Sea. This will be your western border. And this will be your northern border. From the Great Sea you will draw a line to Mount Hor. From Mount Hor you will draw a line to Libo-Hamath, and the direction of the border will be to Zedad. The border will continue to Ziphron, and its direction will be to Hazar Enan. This will be your northern border. For your eastern border you will draw a line from Hazar Enan to Shepham. The border will run down from Shepham to Riblah on the east side of Ain, and the border will descend and reach the eastern side of the Sea of Chinnereth. Then the border will continue down the Jordan River, and its direction will be to the Salt Sea. This will be your land by its borders that surround it." Then Moses commanded the Israelites, "This is the land which you will inherit by lot, which the Lord has commanded to be given to the 9.5 tribes. Because the tribe of the Reubenites by their families, the tribe of the Gadites by their families, and the half-tribe of Manasseh have received their inheritance. The 2.5 tribes have received their inheritance on this side of the Jordan, east of Jericho, toward the sunrise." The Lord said to Moses, "These are the names of the men who are to allocate the land to you as an inheritance: Eleazar the priest and Joshua son of Nun. You must take one leader from every tribe to assist in allocating the land as an inheritance. These are the names of the men from the tribe of Judah: Caleb son of Jephunneh. From the tribes of the Simeonites, Shemuel son of Ammihud. From the tribe of Benjamin, Eladad son of Kislon. From the tribes of the Danites, a leader, Buki son of Jogli. From the Josephites, Haniel son of Ephod, a leader from the tribe of Manasseh. From the tribe of the Ephraimites, a leader, Kemuel son of Shiftan. From the tribe of the Zebulunites, a leader, Elizaphan son of Parnach. From the tribe of the Issacharites, a leader, Paltiel son of Azan. From the tribe of the Asherites, a leader, Ahihud son of Shelemi. And from the tribe of the Naphtalites, a leader, Pedahel, son of Ammihud. These are the ones whom the Lord commanded to divide up the inheritance among the Israelites in the land of Canaan. Then the Lord spoke to Moses in the Moabite plains by the Jordan near Jericho. He said, "Instruct the Israelites to give the Levites towns to live in from the inheritance the Israelites will possess. You must also give the Levites grazing lands around the towns. Thus they will have towns in which to live, and their grazing lands will be for their cattle, for their possessions, and for all their animals. The grazing lands around the towns that you will give to the Levites must extend to a distance of 500 yards from the town wall. You must measure from outside the wall of the town on the east 1,000 yards, and on the south side 1,000 yards, and on the west side 1,000 yards, and on the north side 1,000 yards, with the town in the middle. This territory must belong to them as grazing land for the towns. Now from these towns you will give to the Levites. You must select 6 towns of refuge to which a person who has killed someone may flee, and you must give them 42 other towns. So the total of the towns you will give the Levites is 48. You must give these together with their grazing lands. The towns you will give must be from the possession of the Israelites. From the larger tribes you must give more, and from the smaller tribes fewer. Each must contribute some of its own towns to the Levites in proportion to the inheritance allocated to each. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, "Speak to the Israelites and tell them, when you cross over the Jordan River into the land of Canaan, you must then designate some towns as towns of refuge for you, to which a person who has killed someone unintentionally may flee. And they must stand as your towns of refuge from the avenger, in order that the killer may not die until he has stood trial before the community. These towns that you must give shall be your 6 towns of refuge. You must give 3 towns on this side of the Jordan, and you must give 3 towns in the land of Canaan. They must be towns of refuge. These 6 towns will be places of refuge for the Israelites and for the foreigner, and for the settler among them, so that anyone who kills any person accidentally may flee there. But if he hits someone with an iron tool so that he dies, he is a murderer. The murderer must surely be put to death. If he strikes him by throwing a stone large enough that he could die, and he dies, he is a murderer. The murderer must surely be put to death. Or if he strikes him with a wooden hand weapon so that he could die, and he dies, he is a murderer. The murderer must surely be put to death. The avenger of blood must kill the murderer when he meets him. He must kill him. But if he strikes him out of hatred, or throws something at him intentionally so that he dies, or with enmity, he strikes him with his hand, and he dies, the one who struck him must surely be put to death, for he is a murderer. The avenger of blood must kill the murderer when he meets him. But if he strikes him suddenly, without enmity, or throws anything at him unintentionally, or with any stone large enough that a man could die without seeing him, and throws it at him, and he dies, even though he was not his enemy, nor sought his harm, then the community must judge between the slayer and the avenger of blood according to these decisions. The community must deliver the slayer out of the hand of the avenger of blood, and the community must restore him to the town of refuge to which he fled, and he must live there until the death of the high priest, who was anointed with the consecrated oil. But if the slayer at any time goes outside the boundary of the town to which he had fled, and the avenger of blood finds him outside the borders of the town of refuge, and the avenger of blood kills the slayer, he will not be guilty of blood, because the slayer should have stayed in his town of refuge until the death of the high priest. But after the death of the high priest, the slayer may return to the land of his possession. So these things must be a statutory ordinance for you throughout your generations, in all the places where you live. Whoever kills any person, the murderer must be put to death by the testimony of witnesses. But one witness cannot testify against any person to cause him to be put to death. Moreover, you must not accept a ransom for the life of a murderer who is guilty of death. He must surely be put to death. And you must not accept a ransom for anyone who has fled to a town of refuge, to allow him to return home and live on his own land before the death of the high priest. You must not pollute the land where you live, for blood defiles the land, and the land cannot be cleansed of the blood that is shed there, except by the blood of the person who shed it. Therefore, do not defile the land that you will inhabit, in which I live, for I, the Lord, live among the Israelites. Yeah, so we had a bit more of the traveling of the Israelites. A command concerning the possession of the land, that is, that when they go in to possess the land, they're supposed to destroy all the idols and graven images that the people before them have made and not keep them. They have laws here concerning the divvying up of land, that is, the extent of its borders and the people assigned from each tribe who will do the apportioning of the land, and that it will be apportioned according to the size of the various tribes. That is, to the bigger tribes, they get a larger portion of land, and to the smaller tribes, they get a smaller portion of land. They have the cities here for the Levites, which are scattered throughout the territory of the Israelites, with a small portion of grazing land allocated alongside these individual towns, which I think there's 48, of which 6 of those are to be towns of refuge, that is, places where those who commit involuntary manslaughter are to flee to, so as to escape the avenger of blood, that is, somebody who, I guess, was related or closely associated with the person that the manslayer slew, who's coming for their life. But this person was to flee to these towns of refuge and then stand trial for what they did, and only be put to death on the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. That is, a single person who witnessed it can't put a person to death. And a couple of, various case law here concerning in determining whether or not it was a involuntary manslaughter or murder. Yeah, of which intent is sought out here. That is in 35:22. But if he strikes him suddenly, without enmity, or throws anything at him unintentionally, or with any stone large enough that a man could die without seeing him, and throws it at him, and he dies, even though he was not his enemy, nor sought his harm, then the community must judge between the slayer and the avenger of blood according to these decisions. Yeah, so they try to suss out intent. That is, did this guy know the victim, and was he his enemy? And like the crime scene as well, was the did he throw whatever it was without seeing this guy, and things of that nature. And so if it was involuntary manslaughter, then he was allowed to live out his days in the town of refuge here until the death of the high priest, at which point he could then return to his ancestral homeland. Let's see here. You shall drive out all the inhabitants of the land from before you. God had a unique role for the nation of Israel in regard to the people of Canaan. He used them as a unique instrument of judgment against the Canaanites. You shall drive out all the inhabitants of the land, and to destroy their engraved stones, their molded images, their high places. This unique purpose explains why Israel was commanded not only to defeat them militarily, but to erase the remains of the idolatrous culture. Modern archaeology has documented the corrupt and demonic worship practices of the Canaanites. They were truly a culture ripe for the judgment of God. Yeah. And this particular judgment was meted out at direct request of God. This isn't some blanket request that any cultures, that those following God need to destroy any cultures today. But specifically, this was in regard to the Canaanites, for the Israelites. So, the covenant given to them was a covenant concerning the land of Israel, of which the Christian has a different covenant. You shall divide the land by lot as an inheritance among your families. God's intent was not only to bring judgment on the corrupt culture of the Canaanites, but also to give the land to Israel to possess. If you do not drive out the inhabitants of the land from before you, then it shall be that those whom you let remain shall be irritants in your eyes and thorns in your sides. If Israel failed to drive the Canaanites out of the land, they could still occupy the promised land, but the corrupt practices and heart of the Canaanites would find a place among Israel, and Israel itself would eventually be driven out of the land. It shall be that I will do to you as I thought to do to them. Yeah, and note well that it said that they're to drive out the inhabitants of the land, which is a command that's given much more than, more frequently than the command to destroy them. So this became true of Israel's history. They did not fully drive out the Canaanites, and though they possessed the land, the corruption of the Canaanites continued among Israel until eventually God allowed Israel to be driven out of the land into exile. It is of no use for the church to succeed in the eyes of man, as Israel had succeeded when they occupied the land and became a legitimate nation, instead of an enslaved people. If it merely allows the corrupt practices and attitudes of the world to take root, if this happens, the church should expect to be eventually driven from its place of success. Yeah. Israel was to be a people apart, holy to the Lord. And likewise, the Christian is to be holy, that is, apart for the Lord. And if we don't live lives that are for the Lord, then we will lose fellowship with Him, type thing. That is, yeah. This is the land that shall fall to you. God was about to describe the borders of the promised land to Moses and the children of Israel. Though the lands on the eastern side of the Jordan River belonged to Israel, and 2 1/2 tribes settled on the eastern lands, those lands were not considered to be the promised land, that is, Canaan. As an inheritance, Israel was going to have to take control of the promised land by conquest. They would have to drive out the Canaanite to take possession. Yet they should never consider that the land was given to them because they earned it. It was given to them by God as an inheritance. Inheritances are freely given, not earned. To the Brook of Egypt. There is some debate about the identity of the Brook of Egypt. Is it the Nile River or a smaller stream toward the south? This would determine whether or not God gave the greater Sinai region to Israel as part of the Promised Land. Eleazar the priest and Joshua the son of Nun. The division of the land was in fact a potentially divisive, even explosive issue among the people of Israel. It was right to take the two most godly and prominent leaders of the nation to direct this essential and controversial duty. Command the children of Israel that they give the Levites cities to dwell in. The tribe of Levi had no state or province within Israel. Their inheritance was to be the Lord alone. Then the Lord said to Aaron, You shall have no inheritance in their land, nor shall you have any portion among them. I am your portion and your inheritance among the children of Israel. They shall have cities to dwell in. Yet the Levites had to live somewhere. God commanded that each tribe give cities to the Levites, so that the Levites would be sprinkled throughout the whole nation. And their common land shall. The Levites were to be given more than just the cities. Around each city they were to be given common land, that is grazing land from the NET there, land suitable for the grazing of their animals and for small-scale farming. Among the cities of which you will give to the Levites, there were to be a total of 48 Levitical cities, 6 cities of refuge, and 42 additional cities. From the larger tribe you shall give many, from the smaller you shall give few. The cities were to be distributed proportionally through the nation, so that where there were larger populations and larger areas of land, there would be more Levitical cities, so that no one in Israel would be far from a city of refuge. In proportion to the inheritance that each receives. This reflects God's desire to evenly distribute the Levites, who were to be the most spiritually focused Israelites, the full-time ministers, so to speak, evenly throughout Israel, so their influence could be distributed throughout the whole nation. This shows the wisdom of God in not making a Levitical state that others would have to go to. God intended that these ministers go out among the people to influence them for the Lord. In the same way, God does not intend that there be a Christian country or state where all the Christians live together in spiritual bliss and simply say to the world, "Come and join us if you want." Instead, God wants Christians to be sprinkled throughout the whole world, influencing people for Jesus Christ. That the manslayer who kills any person accidentally may flee there. In the ancient culture of Israel, it was not left entirely up to the government to avenge a murder. Each extended family had a recognized avenger who would ensure that one who murdered a family member would likewise be killed. This practice was based upon a correct understanding of Genesis 9:6. Whoever sheds man's blood, by man his blood shall be shed, for in the image of God, God made man. Who kills any person accidentally? This, if properly understood and applied, could be an effective deterrent to murder and not a bad institution, yet the system had a fatal weakness. What if a death was accidental, yet difficult to prove that it was accidental? We can picture the situation easily. 2 men work together, chopping down trees. When one man swings an axe and the axe head flies off, striking the other man in the head and instantly killing him. The surviving man had good reason to believe the avenger of blood from the dead man's family would track him down and kill him, believing the death was murder. Therefore, such a man could flee to a city of refuge, an appointed Levitical city, where he could stay, safe from the avenger of blood, until the issue was settled, and he could leave the city of refuge safely. And of the cities which you give, you shall have 6 cities of refuge. You shall appoint 3 cities on this side of the Jordan, and 3 cities you shall appoint in the land of Canaan, which will be cities of refuge. There were to be 6 cities of refuge, with 3 on each side of the Jordan River. Each of the 3 cities on either side would be positioned as north, central, and south. Joshua 20, verses 7 and 8, records the actual choices of the cities. They fulfilled the plan of being evenly distributed perfectly. Deuteronomy 19:3 also tells us that proper roads were to be built and maintained to these cities of refuge. A city of refuge was no good to the slayer if they could not get there quickly. Which will be cities of refuge. This meant that the cities were close to all. No one was very far from a city of refuge. This was obviously important when the avenger of blood chased you. That anyone who kills a person accidentally may flee there. Anyone, a stranger or a citizen of Israel, anyone who needed to find protection in the cities of refuge could. Their protection was not limited to the children of Israel. Yeah. That is, even the resident foreigner could flee there as well, because there was to be one law for both the resident foreigner and the Israelite. He is a murderer. The murderer shall surely be put to death. Significantly, the Bible makes the clear distinction between killing and murder. All murder is killing, but not all killing is murder. Society needs laws to establish the principles that decide a death to be either an unfortunate killing or true murder. If he strikes him with an iron implement, murder could be judged depending upon the weapon used. If it was an iron implement, likely to kill, or if it were a stone or a wooden hand weapon by which one could die, then the killer could be found guilty of murder. If he pushes him out of hatred, or, while lying in wait, hurls something at him so that he dies, murder could also be judged by discerning the state of the heart and presence of premeditation in the killer. If the killing happens while lying in wait, or if the killer strikes in enmity, murder can be judged. But if he pushes him suddenly without enmity, if there was the absence of murderous intent, or the absence of premeditation, or if the death was clearly accidental, then the man was not guilty of murder, and could not be turned over to the avenger of blood. So the congregation shall judge between the manslayer and the avenger of blood according to these judgments. Both sides of the story had to be taken into account. Judgment was not to be made on the basis merely of any one side's story. So the congregation shall deliver the manslayer from the hand of the avenger of blood. Having been judged innocent of murder, the manslayer could live in peace and safety, but only within the walls of the city of refuge. Significantly, someone who killed another, but was innocent of murder, still had their life profoundly affected. They had to move from their city, and presumably their family as well, and had to live the rest of their lives in that city of refuge. The tragedy also affected their life. He shall remain there until the death of the high priest. The only thing that could set the man free from the city of refuge was the death of the high priest. At the death of the high priest, the avenger of blood no longer had any rights over the man in the city of refuge. But if the manslayer at any time goes outside the limits of the city of refuge where he fled, until the time of the high priest's death, if the man who sought protection in the city of refuge wandered outside the walls of the city, he was fair game for the avenger of blood. Only within his place of refuge was he safe. The city of refuge as a picture of Jesus. The Bible applies the picture of the city of refuge to the believer finding refuge in God on more than one occasion. Psalm 46:1 says, "God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble." More than 15 other times, the psalm speaks of God as being our refuge. Hebrews 6:18 says that by two immutable things in which it is impossible for God to lie, we might have strong consolation, who have fled for refuge to lay hold of the hope set before us. We can flee to Jesus for refuge. Both Jesus and the city of refuge are within easy reach of the needy person. They were of no use unless someone could get to the place of refuge. Both Jesus and the cities of refuge are open to all, not just the Israelites. No one needs to fear that they would be turned away from the place of refuge in their time of need. Both Jesus and the cities of refuge became a place where the one in need would live. You didn't come to a city of refuge in time of need just to look around. Both Jesus and the city of refuge are the only alternative for the one in need. Without this specific protection, they will be destroyed. Both Jesus and the cities of refuge provide protection only within their boundaries. To go outside meant death. With both Jesus and the cities of refuge, full freedom comes with the death of the high priest. A crucial distinction: the cities of refuge only help the innocent. The guilty can come to Jesus and find refuge. Yeah. One witness is not sufficient testimony against a person for the death penalty. One witness was never enough to condemn a murderer to death. Furthermore, the witnesses had to be so certain that one of them must be willing to initiate the actual execution, to cast the first stone. Yeah, in Deuteronomy 17, verses 6 and 7, it says, "At the mouth of two witnesses or three witnesses shall he that is worthy of death be put to death, but at the mouth of one witness he shall not be put to death. The hands of the witnesses shall be first upon him to put him to death, and afterward the hands of all the people. So thou shalt put the evil away from among you. This puts the words of Jesus regarding the woman taken in adultery in John 8 in perspective. He who is without sin among you, let him throw a stone at her first. Jesus asked for the official witness to step forward and go on record as having witnessed the act of adultery, yet show himself hypocritical enough to bring the woman, but not the man, to judgment. Yeah. It certainly wasn't lawful for her to be put to death without two witnesses. One witness is not sufficient testimony. We may comfort ourselves that we would never judge someone guilty of murder so quickly without proper evidence, but how often do we murder someone's reputation in our mind, or in the minds of others with no witnesses, much less one? God is concerned about the murder of reputation as well as physical murder, and commands, "Do not receive an accusation against an elder except from 2 or 3 witnesses," the same standard as for proving murder, from 1 Timothy 5:19. Remember, 1 Timothy 5:19 does not say except from 2 or 3 gossips. It says except from 2 or 3 witnesses. If a matter is false, it does not become true because many people hear it or many people repeat it. Yeah. And I think too often today we're willing to entertain speculation and gossip without digging into a matter and having a thing brought to light. Yeah, especially when Jesus' prayer prior to his crucifixion was that we may be one as he and the Father are one. And, Philippians 2, the admonition there to be of the same mind, to be united in spirit. We should not be quick in our judgments. You shall take no ransom for the life of a murderer. If someone was guilty of murder, they could not make monetary restitution in the place of their life. The principle of Genesis 9:6 stands, "Whoever sheds man's blood, by man his blood shall be shed, for in the image of God he made man." Yeah, and I think it's also important too that if it's pointed out here that no ransom can be taken in this particular case, that implies that ransom can be taken in the case of other instances. Yeah. You shall take no ransom for him who has fled to his city of refuge. This reflects an important principle, namely that money cannot replace justice. Sometimes a monetary reward satisfies justice, as in Exodus 22:4. If the theft be certainly found in his hand alive, whether it be ox or donkey or sheep, he shall restore double, for example. But other times it does not, and should not be used as a replacement for justice. For blood defiles the land, and no atonement can be made for the land. Unjudged murder defiles a nation. When murderers are not brought to justice, there is a blot on a nation that only the severe judgment of God can cleanse, except by the blood of him who shed it. The way to avoid this defilement is to judge and execute murderers. No atonement can be made for the land for the blood that is shed on it, except by the blood of him who shed it. One may say that because of the stain of so many unpunished murders, the United States of America is a defiled land. Across the country, many are murdered under many circumstances, and few are brought to justice. The blood of the slain cries out before God. Yeah, certainly under this criteria. Yeah. Anywho, thank you so much for joining me today. Hope you have a great day. Bye.